Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is honored to be presented again this year by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Celebrating 50 years of service in Tuscaloosa and West Alabama, the Townsend family of dealerships has been a locally owned company built on service and connection with its customers. At Townsend Honda, with new cars in short supply, they've purchased more than 200 quality pre-owned vehicles. And every one of them goes through a 118-point inspection before it's offered for sale to you. Most of those vehicles are either Honda Certified Pre-Owned or Townsend Certified Pre-Owned, and the dealership also has a fully staffed parts and service department to assist you beyond the purchase day throughout the life of your vehicle. That includes Saturday service, which is available until 1 p.m., even during football season. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Honda salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. In this season of alchemy and the celebration of potions, harvest, and even bubbling cauldrons, we turn to a true culinary alchemist whose ideas for good food meet transformation on the daily. Elizabeth Johnson's rich background reflects her complementary philosophies at her restaurant Pharm Table in San Antonio, Texas. The James Beard Foundation referred to Johnson as a food is medicine guru. And Johnson's extensive studies and travels have culminated in a dream to bring healthy global food practices to the guests at her table. She was a Latin Cuisines Specialist chef instructor of the Culinary Institute of America San Antonio campus from 2008 to 2014 and has been featured in many media spots, including the Wall Street Journal, Simply Ming, and Conde Nast Traveler. As a native San Antonian, Elizabeth has come to appreciate and honor the region's heritage foods and learned to combine her own unique knowledge with the tastes of her home. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that we got to have lunch before we chatted. I've been chatting with you via phone for about a year and really interested in your work here in San Antonio, and today, we are sitting in your home, a couple blocks from your restaurant, surrounded by a menagerie of animals, and a couple of whom are really interested in me and purring. So in case Southern Fork listeners, you hear that, that is exactly what that background noise is. But it just makes sense because this is your life. It's not just your work, right? You flow into life. You pick things from the garden, the micro farm outside your window, your back door every day.
That's right. And then I walk a couple blocks over to the restaurant. And so like any small business owner, it's really nice to live so close. And my home is really a reflection of the restaurant and so many of the things that we try to do at the restaurant. So it's a gift. It's very much a gift for me to be so close.
So we started chatting because I focus a lot on heirloom ingredients and landrace and the taste of place. And so that's really what got us started. And we were chatting about your project at the mission, and then the pandemic happened, and we talked about pausing and all of that. But there's a lot of things that really need to be defined because you're doing a lot of definition by nature in your work. And the first thing I'd love for you to talk to is really the idea of the restaurant as apothecary, because I love the idea of an apothecary. And after eating today, I understand what you mean, but to build that idea is a different thing entirely.
It is. Well, I like the idea of an apothecary too.
It's just fun, all those bottles.
Sure. And I also like the idea of healing people with food. That is the mission of the restaurant. And so when you are a mission-driven organization like we are, it's difficult, especially when you're in the service industry and you're also trying to deliver an experience. It becomes more complicated to do that. A lot of restaurants have the intention of delivering an experience or being experts at one particular thing or one particular genre. And we try to be experts in a lot of different categories, and with food as medicine being the overarching category. And so that is, for me, what an apothecary kitchen is. And my goal is that when you come and you dine with us, the goal for me is that you are enticed by the ingredients, you are visually stimulated, all your senses are stimulated, from the flavors to the sound of the food to the visual sight of the food. And then the party favor is that when you leave the restaurant, you should feel nourished. I don't know if you noticed, but at the end of your meal, I asked if you were nourished. And so we define that as having energy, as opposed to feeling like, oh my God, I'm so full and I feel like a brick is in my stomach that now I have to go take a nap. So our food is intended to be satiating, but to be filling enough to where you have nourishment. And then the ingredients are the way that they're digested in your body would actually give you energy and nourishment, as opposed to depleting your digestive system. So it's a little bit, that's complicated. Everything that I just mentioned is complicated, right. Not mentioning the fact that we try to source locally, that we really try to feature purveyors that have the exact same ethos that we do. And then that now extends to our beverage program as well, and our wine program and our spirits program. And so it just continues to have more and more legs, which is exciting and also challenging.
Right. And specifically challenging in what is still what I would consider a Southern market. It's a Western market too. But this idea that there is either health food or good food.
So I like to say that that Pharm Table is a bridge between health and hedonism.
I love that. But this seems like a lot of work from your standpoint, and it has to come from a passionate place. So what started you down this rabbit hole?
It was actually a vision that I had in a meditation session, that I needed to take all the knowledge that I had amassed over the previous 2 decades of my life and really focus the next chapter and the next decades of my life towards healing with food. So I think that when you have a vision or a calling to do something, it kind of erases all logic and from your psyche, and you're driven by this vision. And so I think that really propelled me forward in the first couple years. And thankfully I had that, because otherwise I probably would have given up because it was so hard. As you mentioned, we are in a very difficult market. I hear from people on a daily basis, both lunch and dinner service, that we should be here, we should be there, we should be this, everyone thinks Pharm Table should be where they're from. And I made the decision to start here in San Antonio because San Antonio is my home. This is where I've raised my children. And I fully recognize as well that it's not the easiest market to start a health revolution.
Right. But, the food is so delicious. It's so satisfying. We actually tasted a lot of things are complicated preps, complicated pantries, just like other restaurants that I cover in my work as a food writer. And so, you've got fermentation crocks, just like other people do. How do you know when something is right for your restaurant, for your calling, for your vision? Because it's a seasonal menu. You're always shifting and changing it.
I think a lot of it is actually, I'm a practical person. I try to be pragmatic and practical. Waste is a really important thing for me. Avoiding waste, avoiding food waste, trying to utilize our ingredients to the fullest. And so part of us being, healing with food is also healing the planet through food. So it's not just about the ingredients. It's a very practical thing. Sometimes, many times, we create recipes and we create dishes based on the byproduct of waste from other recipes.
And that is such a creative fire, is it not?
Yeah, and it actually it's so invigorating. You're like, it's like, I get free. I get to make something from free stuff.
Exactly.
And so many of the phytonutrients are actually in the peels of our foods. So to throw those things away is such a waste. It from a nutritional point of view, it's a waste on your pocketbook. And when our margins are so slim in the food and beverage industry, it makes it all the more challenging to do innovative, cool things. And so I would say that food waste is something that definitely propels us forward. I know something's right when I know that the ingredients that we're using make sense either from a thematic point of view or from a food waste point of view or from a flavor and nutrition point of view, because we try to have things on the menu that are good for the different body types, because we put an Ayurvedic lens on a lot of what we do, even if it's Mexican food, even if it's Brazilian or Peruvian food, even if it's Indian food, or Asian food. We really try to use the rules of food combining when we're creating those different recipes.
So give us an example of that, because a lot of listeners might not be familiar. They're familiar, I think, because of popular culture in that world. But like looking at me, do you know what Ayurvedic?
What your body type is? I'm thinking that you're probably, I can normally pin people, but haven't spent a whole lot of time with you. But I'm thinking that there's really 3 different body types. And I'm thinking that you probably vacillate between, and many times we have dual body types. And so I'm thinking that you probably vacillate between 2 of those body types. But what that means for me is, another layer that you have to look at is the season. So it's hot in San Antonio most of the time. So in a perfect world, we would have 3 seasons. There's 3 seasons in the Ayurvedic calendar. And so we try to have 3 menus that circle around the ingredients and the flavor profiles, as well as the spices and herbs that really help balance all people during that particular season. So the guacamole that we serve, here's an example. A normal guacamole is going to be aggravating to a lot of people. You could even say all 3 doshas, because there's some people who really don't do well with capsaicin. With the
spice.
With spice.
Yeah.
There's some people who do not do well with raw onion. And there's some people that don't do well with nightshades, especially in the summertime when it's hot. Nightshades in the wintertime with certain spices is a lot easier to digest.
And that includes the beautiful tomato.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So you think of your traditional Mexican guacamole, which I love the traditional Mexican guacamole, but it's going to have raw onion, it's going to have chile, and it's going to have tomato. A very traditional, recipe is going to have those 3 things and then some cilantro. So typically that's going to be served with crunchy tortilla chips. Crunchy tortilla chips, just FYI, are really aggravating for somebody like me. It kind of produces a lot of gastrointestinal disruption. So our guacamole is seasoned with a cilantro coconut chutney, which is an Ayurvedic. It's basically like a healing Ayurvedic condiment that we serve on other items in the restaurant. We decided to use that same ingredient to season our guacamole. And turns out that all of the ingredients that are in the guacamole are actually reduce heat from the body. And then we serve that with collard greens, which are also very cooling to the body. And then warm, soft heirloom tortillas, which are made of heirloom non-GMO organic corn, which are also, which also help remove heat from the body. So our guacamole, which is one of the most popular things on our menu and also very mainstream. Everybody knows what guacamole is. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I don't allow my staff to call it guac. That drives me nuts. It's guacamole. So our guacamole is actually pitta pacifying. It reduces heat from the body. So if it's 105 degrees outside, you can come in, you can eat our guacamole and feel fantastic, as opposed to having indigestion or heartburn. And then, you know what? If you want to have it with a really great quality margarita or some great quality mezcal, perfect. You now have a completely anti-inflammatory guacamole that allows you to have something else with it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's the way I look at it.
That's a great example. Great example. And I know you're a San Antonio native and coming back here, and we'll talk about the CIA in a minute, but what is something that you really missed food-wise when you were away from it?
From San Antonio? Mm-hmm. I would say that it's hard to say that I missed anything. I'll be very honest with you, from San Antonio, because when I was growing up, so I was born in Central America, and for me, my comfort food is plantains, black beans, fresh corn tortillas. Those are the things that are my comfort foods. So I always had a problem with Tex-Mex growing up. I never connected with it. Then I lived all around Latin America. When I left San Antonio, I lived and worked outside of San Antonio for, a long time. I came back here. I left when I was 17 and I came back when I was about 32. And so in all those years, I had the opportunity to live, work, and travel throughout Latin America, Miami, New Orleans, Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so when I came back to San Antonio, I really had to rediscover my roots. So many of us just poo-poo our hometown or where we're from, and then we go searching in our youth for Shangri-La elsewhere, and we're enamored with everything elsewhere. And I think it takes a little bit of maturity and perspective to be able to have traveled and seen the world and then come back to your home and then discover or rediscover things that were in your own backyard where you go,
but you're applying that same vision that you learn through travel, and which just kind of opens you. Right. And you're applying that openness back to your hometown.
Right. And so coming back to it as an adult with all the knowledge and background that I had gained, it allowed me to kind of notice for the first time things that I had taken for granted, like nopal, like mesquite, like chili piquin, different things like that I think are really cool, that help define the cuisine of San Antonio. And then I've spent really, I'd say, the last 10 years, instead of focusing all my efforts elsewhere where I did for the last 20 plus years, I've really tried to focus my efforts in, understanding my own backyard.
And there's so much interest when you go deep instead of wide, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. So you were just mentioning to us off mic that you came back to San Antonio to open the Culinary Institute of America's third campus here, which is in the Pearl Complex by Hotel Emma. And in that moment, you're teaching generations of future chefs. Now you're doing this. There are a lot of chefs that listen to the show. What is the top thing that you think they should know, what they should learn, they should begin with?
I think if you're in the culinary field, I think that you need to, that you have to be a good steward of the earth, and you need to build into your operations and or your business plan how you're going to do that, how you're going to recycle, how you're going to compost. We actually anaerobically compost everything, and we've been doing that since the day
And that means that you have a lot.
What that means is that we compost with microbial bran. It's called bokashi, And
Okay.
and so what we're able to do is we're able to compost everything. It's not just raw. It can be raw meat, cooked meat. It can be raw veg, cooked veg. It can be paper towels. Really, because the heat is much higher. And so the compost can actually burn a lot more than a traditional composting system. And so we have averted, I think, 42 tons of waste since we opened in 2015 from the landfill. And even, ever since we opened, that's been a huge thing for me. And it costs money, and it's not inexpensive. And it's something that your staff has to deal with on a daily basis, which costs money. It's something that you have to pay for. At least here in San Antonio, we have to pay for it. The government, the city doesn't offer anything commercially. So I think that creating more recipes with byproduct, creating more recipes with imperfect produce, being good stewards and figuring out what your carbon footprint is has to be part of your operation going into, in 2022, because we're only getting hotter. Climate change is a real thing. And so for me, when I founded Pharm Table, I wanted to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And when we think about the aggregate of our individual choices and then our choices that we make as businesses and institutions, it adds up. And so I think it's just really important that it can't just be about putting pretty food on a plate. That pretty food on a plate has to make sense from an environmental point of view.
Anyone who's listened to the show or follows me on Instagram knows that I'm huge into compost, and actually compost at my home, and I do a very specific method. Everybody has their own that works for them. But I'm amazed at the amount me as one person who cooks and eats whole food. Like I try to eat whole local food as much as possible, how much I divert from the garbage.
And it's interesting because I did a keynote address for our local food bank a couple years ago, and it forced me to really research food waste. And the individual consumer is actually the most important component of the whole, recycling, composting paradigm, because in aggregate, the individual users together are going to have a greater impact than even huge institutions. And that really surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think that is an amazing power that we have. And not only that, but I don't always have a space. I rent and I move. And so sometimes that compost makes just enough like dirt to be the size of a bag of potting soil, right? And I just kind of dump it in a shrub that, is not a garden. I'm not trying to do it because I want to grow butternut squash. I'm just literally taking care of my trash and putting it back. But I've actually from Charleston, South Carolina, and my space was very flat. And I would always have flooding through my front door when it would rain a lot. And over a couple rounds of compost on either side, it's able to hold that water and I don't have flooding.
Well, you know what? That's so fantastic, because water retention and soil health is another thing I told you that I'm really passionate about. Finally, people are talking about it. And there's documentaries that have come out that are popular. Really, if you look at global warming, if you look at inclement weather, these patterns are not happening in a vacuum. And our soil is actually the largest sponge for carbon in our entire Earth. So we could all focus on fossil fuels, or we can focus on electric cars and electricity. But none of that is going to remove carbon from the atmosphere. The only thing that can do that is the soil. But the soil which is depleted, the soil which is mistreated, is not a sponge. It doesn't absorb. It literally is just raped of nutrients. And that was actually the impetus for me to plant this micro farm in the backyard. I said, I'm renting this house and I'm going to be here for this amount of time. And I can either allow this to be just, contributing to global warming, or I can create a little oasis of carbon retention here and try and enrich the soil. And when I leave, it'll be a better place.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's what I was telling you. I rent places. And so I just want to say, I love the home that I'm in. How can I show a little love to the space? When I sit outside with a glass of wine at happy hour every day and watch the sun through the trees after a day, it's just a little hug. And then when I leave, I don't expect anybody to continue it. I just did my part while I was there.
Right. And doing our part. That's just the important thing, that we're all doing our part. And we can be a powerful force if we all do our part together.
Right. And that includes not being despondent, not giving up. So this is an uphill battle. We're talking about a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, I went to a luncheon today in support of Planned Parenthood, and Gloria Steinem was there.
Whoa.
And whoa. And it was pretty cool. And so one of the things that she left us with was that she is that she's addicted to hope. And that oftentimes when you have a cause that you're really passionate about, you can't really do everything that you need to be able to keep moving forward and putting one foot in front of the other and having that momentum and horsepower if you don't have hope.
Right.
And so hope is like the water for all of us to be able to pursue anything that we're passionate about.
And then the results of that is that today, on a random Friday, it was packed in there when we came in for lunch. People are excited. They weren't sitting here thinking you're preaching to me, which Americans always say that. It just feels good. The food is good. It feels good to eat food that is good. It makes you feel good, right? So beyond hope, what is making you hungry? What are you interested in next?
Different cultures make me hungry. Understanding the way different people around the world connect with, preserve, and utilize the ingredients that are native to their soil is so fascinating to me. And it's because I love anthropology, I love history, I love the story that food tells, and it just is like this automatic feeder of creativity and energy for me personally, that I just feel like I can never stop learning.
Right. And it's easy to intersect with that, even if it's not you that is making the food. All you have to do is eat it. And there's something that kind of informs your palate, just not energetically, but somehow physiologically, right?
And I think food is the great connector of humanity. And so it gives me hope in humanity.
Good. Yes, I have hope every time I do one of these podcasts. What is something that really meshes like a puzzle piece about your job with your natural personality?
Well, my Ayurvedic body type / personality is Vata, Pitta. So I live up in the clouds. Basically, that's what that means. So I'm very much an ideas person. I'm very much a dreamer. And so I think that creating a mission, creating a movement, and then trying to communicate creatively foods through different vendors, through different seasons is kind of like my gift, is the thing that makes me feel fulfilled. And it's also, I think, the gift that I can give to my staff and to the world, because my goal is to inspire other people to do the same or to find their own path.
Quick fire. What's one thing that's keeping you up at night?
Trying to take care of my staff in the best way possible with all of the pressures and stresses that we have right now, with the economy, with inflation, with COVID. All of these things create kind of a stone soup of challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. People leaving the industry, trying to find staff that are aligned with our mission. Those are the things that do keep me up at night.
Yeah, that's a lot. That is a lot. And I have so many chefs and restaurateurs, business owners that feel the weight of a lot of people behind them.
And when I put my head on the pillow at night, I very much feel responsible for all the families that I support And so making sure that all the decisions that I make for the business are as calculated as possible so that I can ensure that I'm doing right by my staff.
Well, it was such a delicious lunch, and I hope this is just another of our conversations. But one thing that I reserve for Southern Fork guests is something I'd like to call the magic picnic basket question. And so I love to bring this idea of a death row meal forward. I used to ask about death row meals. We talk about that a lot in our industry. And I just realized I don't believe in the death row, and I haven't for years. So why do I keep asking that question? So instead, I would like to bring you a picnic basket full of some things that bring you life. So because of that basket, I can time travel. I can go back in time and can script anybody to make one more bite of something that you would love to taste. I can source a little bit, but I'm guessing your sourcing is a lot better than mine. And I can also cook. So I would love to put some things in that basket for you. They don't have to go together, but Southern Fork listeners just like to know people through food. And so therefore they would love to know some of the things you like to eat.
Well, let's see here. I am most inspired by Latin American and Middle Eastern ingredients. And so if I had a last meal, or if I had something that I actually, something that would be very special to me, it would probably be a really beautifully prepared heirloom corn tortilla, an aguacate criollo, which are these little bitty avocados that have edible skin that are grown in Mexico, more in central Mexico to southern Mexico, with some hoja santa, maybe a beautifully prepared fresh farmer's cheese, like a queso fresco, and then as many calites as you could possibly find. Get me some epazote, get me some papaloquelite. Just allow me to make tacos out of heirloom corn tortillas, beautifully cut aguacate criollo, and then all these other beautiful quelites. Give me a little comal so I can heat everything up. Maybe give me some quesillo that's freshly made. That makes me very happy.
So you'd like to cook. I love it. If people want to learn more about Pharm Table and just the amazing flavors coming out of this restaurant that leave you just wanting to go back for more, but also leave you with enough energy to do something else, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. We're going to have links there, as I always do. Also images of the face behind the voice. If you like what you hear, it is always different. It is always interesting, and it is always nourishing for me to do this work. And so there are more than 300 episodes in the archives. So delve in and learn about the culinary landscape that is hiding in plain sight in this country, and especially in the South. So thank you so much for taking the time with me.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for having Bella, Ginger, Poppy, Charlotte, and Caroline here as well.
Yes. I'm a little allergic to cats, Southern Fork listener, so I have to go wash my hands. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome to Talking with a Mouthful. As I mentioned on this episode, I've been chatting and working with Elizabeth for a couple of years now, just kind of using her for context as I continue to research some articles that aren't in the world yet. So that just means that I had built more and more anticipation to visit Pharm Table, and I was definitely not disappointed. It was so delicious all the way through, but I'm going to share with you, it was just so cool how it began. Now, those of you that are familiar with this podcast know that I do love an occasional tasting menu, and there are all little kinds of amuse-bouche and surprises throughout a tasting menu. And I just like kind of giving up control and taking a roller coaster ride with a chef. And in Elizabeth's menu kind of took a cue from that, because it began with a ginger meal starter. And this was just the coolest thing during lunch. What it is a spoon, one of those fancy spoons that you get at tasting menus, like a big soup spoon, house pickled ginger marinated in lemon juice, turmeric, raw local honey, Himalayan salt, and fresh herbs. It was a great way to begin. Now, I also have to share with you a secret. I'm pretty obsessed with ginger these days. We always talk about how to keep a pantry and how to be able to cook. Just sit down and cook a simple meal just from your fridge and your pantry. And in the past couple of years, I now have to keep fresh ginger in my crisper drawer. I use it in smoothies. I cook with it all the time. I have a really great raw peanut sauce right now in a nice jar in my fridge that makes dipping cucumbers into it really great. But I end up using a lot more ginger than I ever imagined. But this ginger meal starter fired up all those gastro juices. It was like a wholesome Amaro to begin a meal with. And it was just a fun surprise to a really fun and delicious meal. So thanks so much for listening. And yeah, I'm going to be drinking a lot of ginger tea this season. So I will be right here next week, fired up to talk to you again. Have a great one.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?